Now we'll be moving on to more lighter, dosti-centered conversations. Um, yeah. Okay. Long before the South Asian diaspora became Silicon Valley's defining story, an Indian and a Pakistani were already here, building, proving that the most powerful partnerships come from the most unlikely places. Please welcome Vivek Ranadivé, owner of Sacramento Kings, and Sohaib Abbasi, chair of board of directors Udemy.
All right, Vivek, what would you like to talk about?
Well, first, I just want to thank everyone for putting this together. Love, your name is appropriate. You're spreading a lot of love. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to say to the young people here that we're living in an unprecedented era right now. And really, the next few years, we're going to see exponential change. You know, the amount of wealth and value and goodness that's going to be created over the next 10 years is going to be unprecedented in human history, and you guys are going to drive it. And a big part of that is going to be the network and the friendships that you form. So I'm very fortunate.
We're going to talk about the past, not about the future.
Well, I was going to say I'm very fortunate because
he's the evangelist.
When I came,
he cannot help himself
No.
but paint this picture.
No, but I was very fortunate that I had a friend like Sohaib. So that's been part of my journey. And
Let's start from the beginning, when we got here.
yeah.
I'm happy to start, and then obviously your impressions. I came to America, I landed in New York in summer of 1974. And the first evening in America, President Nixon went on TV and announced that he was stepping down. And my first thought was, there's no job security in America. If the most powerful man can be pushed out, it's a different country. I went to University of Illinois campus, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and I was going to the student union. And in the student union, all of a sudden, I find these men and women running without any clothes on, completely naked. And it was my welcome to America moment. It was a phenomenon called streaking.
Did you join them?
No, I didn't join them. So when I saw them, I said, well, I've got to find some South Asians, because South Asians do not run around naked. Streakings, I don't know how many of you know, streaking had the peak in 1974, the year before you got here. So I naturally went and looked for South Asians, and I found there were very few of us back there. There were Indians and Pakistanis, and there weren't that many of us that we had that we could divide among us in terms of who's a what and all that. So some of my friends from them, one of them was a gentleman called Vishal Gujral. Now, I didn't know at the time, but his father ended up becoming the Prime Minister of India. Back in those days, it was just like we were all friends. But Vishal had this very odd habit. He would hold your hands in public. And I'm told that in South Asia, that was a behavior that was okay.
We do that. We do that at home.
No, we don't do that. I mean, come on.
Yeah, you with your friends, you put your arm around.
Arm around and you hold your hands while we're talking and all of that kind of thing. So anyway, it was like the South Asians. That was my beginning, my impressions of America.
You're very westernized, dude.
Beg your pardon?
You're like super westernized.
No, but I mean, obviously you've got to be. It's like when you're the only South Asian, what are you going to be?
Yeah.
You're going to stand out and look at me, I'm different.
Well, he's very westernized. I call him Bada Sahib, because every time I see him, he shows up in a brand new big-ass Bentley, okay? So I don't know if you guys know what Bada Sahib means, but it means big boss.
Okay,
So.
all right, now that he's introduced it, I mean, we're going to talk about my first meeting with him. So I'd heard of him, but I had never met him in person. So I was a CEO of a company called Informatica. He was a CEO of a company called TIPCO. We were not competing, we were in related fields. So he was kind enough to invite me for lunch at TIPCO. So I drive down to TIPCO because obviously he doesn't go to anyone else, you have to go to him. So I got over there and he was very gracious. He was a very gracious host, comes over, and then we go to the executive dining room where there was tablecloths and utensils and silverware and all of that. And the chef, he had a personal chef, and the chef comes and says, what would you like to drink? Name whatever fruit or vegetable it is, and we'll prepare it for you. And what would you like for your main course? Fish, chicken, whatever it is, we'll prepare it for you. So he lived the life of a king, the Badshah Sahib. I could beat the Bada Sahib. He's the Badsha Sahib. So that was his. And my lunch usually was going to the cafeteria and having the same old chicken sandwich on wheat bread. And he, on the other hand, dined like a king.
Well,
So that was.
yeah. Well, so, no, I think, so just going back to my journey, Sohaib, so when you get to be an old guy, you're able to look back at your life and say, was there a defining moment? And for me, it happened, and ironically, we've come full circle because we're sending a spaceship to the moon right now. But I was a little boy in Bombay, and I had a transistor radio plastered to my ear. And I heard these magical words, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And I was listening to the Voice of America broadcast the moon landing live all the way to Bombay. And I was like, wow, who are these people who could take a man, put him in a box, send him 250,000 miles away flawlessly to land. I want to be one of them. I want to come to America. I want to study technology. And what was crazy is that the entire NASA space program had less computing capacity than we all have in our pockets today. So that was kind of my moment. And then, I took my studies seriously. I applied to MIT, which is where I wanted to go. And I showed up. I was like 16, 17 at the time. And I showed up, and the first two guys I met, they both became best friends. The first guy was Yusuf Mania, who was from Karachi. And the other guy was Riaz Khan, who was from Dhaka, from Bangladesh. And we all had very little money, so the first stop was the financial aid office because you needed to beg for some money. In those days, you couldn't really convert the rupee into dollars. And so we had that proverbial $50, and then we had to beg. But the next stop, I still remember, and I just caught up with Yusuf yesterday, we didn't have winter clothes. Like in Bombay, you don't need, jackets and parkas. And so there was a place in Boston called Eastern Mountain Sports. And all the Desi kids would go there, and for not a lot of money, you bought this thing called a parka. And we bought 3 of them, one for each of us. And they were like a puke green color. And you zip them up like that, and you could like barely see out of them. So that was like my first day in America. I went with Yusuf and Riaz, and we bought parkas. And to this day, they're very good, very, very good friends. And Yusuf's been one of my very best friends, my entire adult life, basically.
And I got to meet Yusuf because Yusuf joined Oracle. Many years after he came over and he joined Oracle. And Yusuf is a very good tennis player.
And he still plays a few times.
And he plays tennis.
Yeah.
And Yusuf discovered that Larry Ellison is a tennis player. So when Larry Ellison found out that Yusuf is a tennis player, he invited him. So he became his tennis buddies.
Yeah.
And in one of the tennis rounds that he had, he convinced Larry Ellison, you should open an office in Pakistan. So Yusuf Mania, his best friend, went back to Pakistan and opened the first office in Karachi.
That's right.
It's a small world.
Yeah, and so the whole Desi community was very close. And in those days, they had a cafeteria at MIT, and it was like you had to buy these tickets, and each ticket was $1. And it was 1 ticket for breakfast, 2 tickets for lunch, and 3 tickets for dinner. And I don't know if anyone from MIT is listening to this, but I apologize to MIT. And I did donate a lot of money to them, so I think I paid for my past sins. But what would happen is, and people thought back then that Yusuf and I were twins. He's much better looking than me. He has these, amazing green, emerald green eyes. But they all mistook us for each other. So one day, it was Yusuf's turn that day. And with the 2 tickets, he bought lunch. And Riaz and I were waiting there because it was unlimited how much you could get for 2 tickets. So Yusuf had like a whole pile of sandwiches on his plate. And Riaz and I were sitting there hungrily waiting for our sandwiches. But then the lady at the counter looked at him and said, young man, I don't believe you're going to eat all that yourself. So Yusuf said, watch me. And he sat there and he ate all the sandwiches.
Wow.
Now, the bad news was Riaz and I were still hungry, but the good news was we were never stopped again.
That's what it was like to be among the first South Asians in tech. And that is the reason why we made our mark, by having all the sandwiches.
That's right. That's right. No, we helped each other.
We helped each other. I mean, I'll tell you how I got a start. My master's thesis, the single best decision I ever made in my career was that I picked a master's thesis topic that happened to be what Oracle commercialized. And one day, by chance, I went to a software show. I was working as a programmer. I went by chance to a software show, and this was a person showing a relational database called Oracle. The company was called RSI, never heard of them. And I walked up to the sales guy, and I asked him a lot of questions, and he said, "How do you know all this?" And I said, "Well, I studied in college." And he turned to me and said, "How would you like to start the sales operation? In the Midwest, we don't have an office." So I said, "Well, I'm not a sales guy, I'm a programmer." He said, "Would you take a call from our founder?" So I get a call from some guy called Larry Ellison, never heard of him. And it was a good call, and at the end of it, he said, "Why don't you come over and for an interview?" So I came to California for an interview, and there were only 3 people that I met that day. Larry Ellison, of course. I met his assistant, Barbara Booth. She is the mother of David Ellison, who happens to be the most powerful person in Hollywood these days, and Umang Gupta. Umang was working on some special projects for Larry Ellison, ensuring the OEM, and then I ended up having a very good conversation with Larry, and at the end of it, he said, "The job is yours," and I said, "Larry, I'm not sure if I want to be in sales." And he said, "Well, if it doesn't work out, you could transfer to product development." So that's how I got to be the first South Asian at Oracle in sales, and then a year and a half after that, the first South Asian programmer at Oracle as well. So those were the days when it was just like we all worked together and we did whatever was needed in order to get whatever was required. Early days. And at that point when I'm describing, Oracle had 30 employees, and their revenue was $4 million only. So I was very fortunate to have actually joined the company at a time when there were only 30 people, and by the time I left, there were 42,000 people. So it was an amazing journey, and over the years, I got the chance to meet with and work with a lot of South Asians. Initially, there weren't very many of us in the technology industry, but over time, the complexion of the workforce changed dramatically, but not till the late 80s. Till the late 80s, South Asian were a novelty. And people like him were even a bigger novelty because he actually did something which very few of us even imagined we could do, start something, which takes a lot of guts. So in those days, a South Asian...
Well, that's because I was always unemployable.
Well, you still are. I mean,
that's true. I'm
I
still
know.
unemployed.
I mean, you're one of a kind. It's like...
No, thank you, Sohaib. But ironically, the first company I started was also with a Pakistani. And his name was Javed. And he was a couple of years ahead of me at MIT. And Javed and I were always very entrepreneurial. And I knew that Javed was very creative because, and one of the reasons that everybody wanted to be his friend is because he had a car. And in those days, nobody had cars. And if you were a student and you had a car, then you were doing something right. But Javed had this very unique scheme, which I knew that he'd be a good entrepreneur. So in Boston in those days, in Cambridge where we were, it was impossible to get parking. But Javed had fixed that problem. And the way he fixed it is that somehow he came to own a no parking sign. And so what he would do is when he would park his car, then the sign would be removed. And then when he left, he'd put the sign up.
Smart guy.
So he always had that. So I said, you know what, this is the guy that I want to start my company with. And so Javed and I, in those days, computers were just starting to come into play, and businesses were all trying to figure out how to automate. So what Javed and I would do is we would look at ads in the Boston Globe where people were advertising, trying to hire programmers. And we would then call those businesses and we would say, hey, rather than take on the load of hiring somebody full-time, why don't you let MIT students do the work? And so we would get these projects. So him and I would go and, we'd put on a jacket and we'd go to these businesses. And I think I was like a sophomore, he was a senior. And then we would kind of hire MIT students for X and then charge like 3X to the businesses and then kind of project manage and do that. So even my own journey, my first partner was Javed also from Pakistan.
Yeah, and obviously I got a chance to work with a lot of very talented Indian programmers when I was at Oracle. Most of the people, towards the end of it, it ended up becoming a lot more South Asians. The original, when we started our careers, it was very rare to find people of South Asian. And the title of this talk, before they knew our names, Vivek, I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of experience. In the early days, I was called by every single pronunciation of my name. Sohabi was one of them. So I don't even understand, how did you get Sohabi? Sohaib, Sohaib. So it was basically anyone who, if they say a name and no one responds, they must be talking about me. And that was the way it was back when we started our career. But the change that happened, in my experience, at least working at a big company, at Oracle, was in the 80s, a lot of the Indian outsourcers came to the larger organizations and made a pitch that we could provide you with quality assurance services. It started off with that, and they were very successful in doing it. And then we started to recruit people from India. Initially, when Oracle, they would recruit from the top universities, MIT, Caltech, Princeton. They were the #1 recruiter at one point from those. And there weren't that many South Asians in those institutions that were studying computer science. It was a novelty back in those days. And that started to change in the 80s and in the early 90s. And that's when people started to see a lot more South Asian representation in technology. Today, it's very hard to believe that when we started, I was the only South Asian in sales organization, or I was the only South Asian working product development at a big company like Oracle. But back then, it was the norm.
Also, the irony is that actually even Informatica wasn't the founder Indian.
But yeah, so my second job, which is what he's referring to, because he's tired of hearing everything about Oracle.
Well, that's because they've been extorting for like 50 years.
So my second job was after I spent 20 years at Oracle, I thought it was time for something else. So I joined the board of a company called Informatica. And a few months into it, the company was struggling. And the board member, one of them asked, would you consider stepping in? And I thought it was a theoretical question, a backup plan. And so at some point, maybe they wouldn't do it. 2 days later, the guy comes back to me and said, can you step in as a CEO on Monday? And it was a Thursday. So that company, the founder was an Indian. So my predecessor was founded by 2 Indians. Gaurav Dhillon was one of them. And the other gentleman, Diaz Nespany. So I ended up being the founder, replacing those 2 Indians as the second CEO. And my successor, interesting enough, was also an Indian. And that particular company.
Yeah, but just what Sohaib did with that company was amazing, because the company was in serious trouble. And Sohaib stepped in on a moment's notice, and he completely turned it around and made it one of the hottest companies of that time. So he turned it around very, very quickly.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And during my tenure, we ended up opening an office, or expanding an office in Bangalore, and I got a chance to go to India. And I really enjoyed it, because I went to Bangalore and I really wanted to go to Delhi and Agra and visit more of India. And wherever I went, it was like being home. For me, at least. It had that feeling that I'm home. To me, it was no different. And I worked with a lot of Indians, and it was a great run that I had. And I'll tell you one more story about Vivek. Now, Vivek had become a celebrity. I was just a CEO. He'd bought Sacramento Kings. And as the owner of Sacramento Kings, he enjoyed going on television. So he was on the morning show and the afternoon show, evening show, late night show, every show there was. So some of his investors got a little frustrated with Vivek, and they started calling him and said, Vivek, you are the CEO of a public company. You need to devote a lot more attention. And that annoyed him. So Vivek calls me up one day. He says, Sohaib, I've got this great idea. I said, Vivek, what's your idea? He said, why don't we combine the two companies and you run it? I said, all right. What are you going to be doing? He said, I'll be the chairman. And I said, just a figurehead chairman? I mean, just like you're going to be there, just the title and all of that? He said, no, I want to be the executive chairman. I said, what does executive chairman do? If I'm the CEO, what are you going to be doing? And he said, he's going to help me with the strategy. I said, so you want me to work for you? Is that what you're trying to tell me? So I went to the board. Obviously, I would have loved to work with him. Went to the board and I recommended, I said, here's an idea, and one of the board members just didn't think it was a very good idea. So we did have an opportunity at one point, but I have to give him credit. So he sold his company to a private equity group called Vista. And Robert is the guy who started it. And he told Robert, he said, Robert, why don't you buy Informatica? And after you buy Informatica, you could combine the two companies and have Sohaib run it. So I thanked him. I said, Vivek, you're always looking out for what I do next because you don't want me to be unemployed. So he did that. Robert never called me. So obviously it never happened.
Well, eventually.
Eventually somebody else acquired Informatica.
Well, this is not a Pakistani story, but when Robert is, I think he's like the richest black gentleman in the U.S. now. But there was another company also run by like a Puerto Rican guy, a big private equity firm, and he wanted to buy TIPCO as well. But Robert was very determined, so he came to my house. And I told him, I said, Robert, look, I got another offer, but I'll tell you what, I'm gonna have a friend of mine come, and I have a basketball court in my basement, and I'll, if you can beat the guy at horse, I'll sell you the company. So he said, okay. So then my friend showed up, but my friend was Chris Mullin. And for those of you who know basketball, he's like one of the greatest players and shooters of all time. So he's not going to beat Chris Mullin, so that didn't work out. So then I said, okay, there was like a staircase leading down to my basketball court. And I told him, I said, if you can stand on the staircase and make a shot from there, I'll sell you the company. And I'll give you any number of tries you want. So the guy, when he came to my house, he was wearing like a three-piece suit, then he took off his jacket, he took off his vest, he unbuttoned his shirt, he was like sweating, and he just, credit to him, he just kept going and going and going. And then finally he put just enough spin on the ball where it went off and went in. And I told him, put your thumbs up, winner. So I ended up selling it to him, and of course, I told him to buy ETF.
No, he did. I have to give him credit. It's like he did tell him, except Robert didn't follow up, obviously.
Yeah.
So the original panel that this was supposed to be did not have me. It was going to be about sports. Yeah. So when I talked to Vivek about this panel, and he said, I've got this great idea, I said, well, what we're going to do is, I'll tell you why I got invited, because I wasn't supposed to be part of it, but what the original intent was going to focus on sports. So I suggested Vivek would be the first South Asian to own an NBA team is quite.
Oh, thank you.
And it would be great. So I said to Vivek, I said, who else would be there? It's like, he said, what about you? I said, I don't watch basketball. And you've never invited me to one of your Kings games. No, he always says that I'm going to invite you, but he never has invited me to any of the Kings games. But now that I've embarrassed him in front of you, you will probably invite me.
You're always invited. Your charter.
I mean, come on. What is this? You're always welcome, but never. There's no invitation that goes in. What am I going to?
But it's interesting because, and I tried to get Shams here.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. So the guy that is absolutely dominating sports right now is a young man, a young Pakistani, and his name is Shams Charania. And so you see him on TV all the time, and he's a very big deal. There used to be a guy called Woj, and after Woj retired, then Shams became the new guy. And he's the first, again, it's all about breaking barriers, right? And when Sohaib and I were in college, most the most that anyone could aspire to was, get a job at a top company like an HP or an Oracle. And then back then they were like, oh, well, you Desis, you're not very articulate, so you can't even be in marketing. So then it was, well, maybe we can be in marketing. And it was, well, maybe we can actually start a company. Well, yeah, you can start the company, but then you need like a white guy to take it public. Well, no, maybe we can take it public. Well, no, but then you need another guy to make it $1 billion company. No, maybe we can do that. And then, of course, sports ownership. But I think Shams broke the ultimate barrier where he's in sports. He's like the #1 guy in sports media right now. And he was trying to come here, but he had a previous engagement, and he would have joined us by video, but we didn't get that set up. But I'm just really proud of what you guys are doing and the barriers you're breaking and how all of you are changing the world.
Yesterday, Vivek sent me a text and said, during our session, can we make a phone call? I said, well, that's a very strange request. It's like in the middle of the session.
No, that's not what you said. You said, are you going to get Gandhi or Jinnah?
No. Yeah, I said, so my immediate response was, who did you have in mind, Gandhi or Jinnah? Because the conference is about Dosti. Yeah. But he was going to call Shams.
Yeah. And also I was going to call Hassan, who's broken another barrier. So there's another Indian guy called Hassan Minhaj, and he's become a very big deal he's become a huge star. And I just thought if we can get Hassan and Shams, they both broken barriers. One guy's Indian, the other guy's Pakistani. Right. And he's become a very big deal. But then, my journey, Sohaib, with my son Anil has a fund called Soma Capital, and through him I met Rafi, who's sitting there, who claims he's Pakistani, but he doesn't. He sounds more like a New Yorker, but he runs Bo Capital, which is our investment fund, in partnership with the University of California. And he's just a great guy, but the only issue that I've always had with him is that every time he meets an Indian entrepreneur, he just pulls out the checkbook and he wants to write the check. And I have to say, Rafi, are you sure? Are you sure? And he loves Indian entrepreneurs. He just he goes there and he writes checks and he helps them and he helps build great companies. So Rafi, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. We need more Indian entrepreneurs coming to our doors. We need more Pakistani entrepreneurs coming to our doors and bringing that hard work ethic, that immigrant hustle, and the ability to break barriers and say, we're going to transform every industry from robotics to insurance to logistics. There's no industry that we believe can't be disrupted by a passionate entrepreneur from any country, but especially
Well, thanks, Rafi. And what I love, Sohaib, about sports is that, we don't really care about your ethnic origin or your religion or, your nationality. We just have one question, which is, do you have game, And if you have game, come join the team. And that's kind of the attitude that you and I have always had, right?
Yeah.
That if you got game, come join.
Work. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The other South Asian who owns a football team happens to be a fellow alum of the University of Illinois.
The Jaguars.
Shad Khan.
Yeah.
And he's very proud of his heritage. Yeah. I had to host him at one of the Thai events, so I asked him, Shad, why do you have that mustache? It's like, do you guys know who I'm talking about? Yeah. Have you seen his mustache?
Yeah, it's very impressive.
It's very impressive. So I asked him in front of him, he said he's very proud of his Punjabi heritage. So those of you that are Punjabi in this audience, you better start kind of working on that mustache. The funny guy.
Yeah,
but he's the only other South Asian that owns a team, in his case, a football team.
Yeah. Well, I think, Sohaib, I would just like to give your resume to everybody. So there's 5 things you need to know about this, my friend, okay? One is, obviously, he's one of the tech visionaries, and you guys all know that, and he's one of the architects of transactional architectures going back to his days in Oracle, but that's well known. Second thing is he's just like his family, they're the nicest, most philanthropic, kindest people that you'll ever meet, and he's just an amazing guy. Number 3 is he loves golf. I don't know if he's that good, but he loves it. He plays a lot of golf. So that's number 3. Number 4 is that, like I said, he drives this big-ass Bentley everywhere. And He's Bada Sahib. But I think I saved the best for last, is that the guy's a serious overachiever, and the reason I say that is if you ever meet his wife, Sarah, your reaction will be, how did that happen? She is like the most charming, brightest, most beautiful, gorgeous, kindest person ever, and I still haven't answered that question. So,
There's some things you'll never know.
yeah,
Something you have to strive for.
Yeah.
Something you have to look forward to. That someday
yeah,
you will find out.
yeah.
Well, that was very kind of you. He's never said anything nice to me, ever. And he's now said it in public.
Yeah.
But the thing I would tell you about him is his Christmas parties are legendary. Or is it called Christmas, or is it called
I think-
holiday party?
I think
Sorry.
technically, because we want to welcome all faiths.
All faiths and all holiday party.
I just call it a
And
holiday.
it's like a
party.
who's who, everyone is over there.
That's true. In fact, the first Google investment was done at one of my holiday parties.
Yeah, no, I know. It's like
Yeah.
legendary. He hasn't invited me to one in many years.
I stopped
But
having
it's like-
them after
no,
COVID.
I mean, he says, I sent it to you. I said, well, I am no longer working
No,
at
no.
Informatica. Do not send
No,
it to my
no.
Informatica email address.
No, so what happened is I have this party and literally 1,000 people from all over the world come to my house, and my
It's
bas-
like, it's who's who.
yeah, it's a who's who. You have
And he actually
Celebrity.
dresses up for it. He doesn't
Yeah.
dress up like
Yeah,
what he's
yeah.
dressed
It's a
up
black
like
tie,
over
so-
here. It's like he's wearing a tuxedo and all that kind of thing. You won't recognize him.
no. So what happened is during COVID I stopped having it, and I haven't
You started-
reinstated.
okay, so you haven't left
You're
me
a
out.
charter member. You're
charter
always
member is
there.
like-
Yeah. So, but
But that also shows you how respected and well-loved he is in the community.
no,
And it's like everyone from not just the South Asian community, is the tech community and all of that. Is if you want to go meet someone, just get invited to one of his holiday parties. You'll find them there.
no, that's kind. Thank you. So Sohaib, let me ask you a little bit about the future. What, you've seen so many cycles, right? We've lived through relational databases, cloud, mobile, internet, and now we're living kind of in what I call civilization 3.0, which is the AI age. So what are you excited about?
I mean, I think I am concerned. I'm excited about the possibilities, but the big question for me is there's a lot of talk about multi-agentic digital workers replacing white-collar workers. And we haven't quite thought it through in terms of what would be the skills that would be needed, that would be for the next generation. But I do believe my friend over here does have some words. Vivek has spoken on it, so I'd be very interested in, if you were going to college today, what would you learn?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I was at a dinner party, and the host had his daughter at the party, and she had a bachelor's and a master's in computer science from Stanford, and she said that she was actually struggling to get a job, and so that made me think that what should one study, what should one do, and my answer is actually no different than what we would have said to our kids many years ago, which is, first of all, just get into the best college you can, because brand does matter. Number two, if your inclination is the sciences, then study math, physics, computer science, but also take classes in liberal arts. And conversely, if your inclination is in liberal arts, then take classes in math and subjects like that. Get really proficient in AI, because obviously AI is going to dominate everywhere. And one of the reasons to go to college is actually the social aspect of it. And when I started my first company, most of my early colleagues were classmates of mine from MIT and Harvard. And that's my superpower. I've always been able to surround myself with people that are way smarter and better than me, like him. And so just your friend circle matters. That'll determine success. And who knows, maybe it'll be the next Zuckerberg, or maybe you're the next Zuckerberg. So it's not just what you know, it's what you can do with what you know, but it's also who you know. It's going to matter more. So I think there's going to be massive disruption, massive change, but I think the lessons are the same as when we started our careers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Would you agree with what I'm saying?
No, I do, because I, for one, would not have predicted the industry to be what it is. And to give you a very simple example, when I interviewed for the job at Oracle, Oracle was 4 million. And Larry Ellison's now one of the richest people and regarded as one of the most ambitious people. You know what he said to me in the interview? He said, Sohaib, someday we will be $100 million company. And that to him was a stretch. So it's a little bit like we don't know how things will unfold. So all you could do is prepare yourself for whatever. And my career is just like that. It's like, as an engineer, how did I end up in sales? I didn't plan it. How did I then transfer back into programming? And how did I become a CEO? I didn't even plan that, because it was like somebody asking me, in 5 days, you're the CEO. So it's a little bit like, just be prepared. Be prepared. Critical thinking obviously would be very important, because right now the natural tendency, most of the people have just asked Chat GPT or Claude or something.
Yeah.
But that critical thinking was still
Especially if you can think, if you can color outside the lines.
Exactly.
Because,
exactly.
At the end of the day, LLMs are just a giant lookup table.
Exactly.
And it's just information that's out there. So people who can think outside that, and oftentimes liberal arts education helps you think, outside the box. So I'm a huge believer of that.
Do we have still time, or are we out of time?
Do we have questions, or?
Or do we have, yeah, we can, if there is time, we'll open it up for questions. Ask, there's a question over there.
So thanks for being here. I'm Razak. I'm an undergrad here studying science, tech, and society, so interested in being here. I guess my question, you spoke about this earlier, Vivek, is a lot of South Asians will be great as employees. They'll be the yes sir kind of types. But what do you think are the personality traits or the traits that we should build that allow us to go from being employees to owners, from being yes sir types?
So I'll give you a very specific example. My interview with Larry Ellison, which was not the yes type thing, I knew he'd copied IBM's idea, so I asked him, I said, Larry, I know you've copied IBM's idea. In what way have you innovated? So that got his attention. He said, well, we've added a data type, and then we've got this connect by feature that we've added that does bill of material queries. So the fact that I felt comfortable enough, in a respectful way, to challenge, that's something we all learned. And obviously we all have to be comfortable in order for us, because none of us needs to be a yes man or whatever. You just need to have the conviction of your own thoughts and all of that for you to be able to present. And the more assertive you are, the further you'll go. His story is all about being assertive. But he takes it to the next level. He's Mr. He can evangelize and sell almost anything.
I think that's a great question, and I think that part of the kind of the Desi mindset is just get a good job and manage risk, but you guys don't have to do that. And there are a lot of young people, our kids' age, that have broken all those barriers and are aggressively starting great companies. And it's not for everyone. It's not for most people. But I think that, if you just, I'll tell you a story. I was with my partner, Tanya, this morning, and we were driving here, and I was driving myself. And so we had the GPS tell us how to get here, and I kept not listening to it. And she said, that's just you. Like, somebody tells you do it this way, and you want to do it that way. And I said, well, that's true, actually. I'm always asking, is there a better way? And I believe that I'll end with this story, but I was friends with Steve Jobs. And so imagine Steve going to his board and saying, hey, I want to make a mobile phone. Well, Steve, how much experience do you have doing it? 0. He says, okay. But Steve, all these companies, Nokia, Motorola, Fujitsu, you name it, they're all tripping over each other trying to make a cheaper phone. So how are you going to make it cheaper? Well, I'm not. It's going to be more expensive. But Steve, those phones, they're making them with like 8 parts now. They made it into a science. How are you going to do that? No, I'm not. Mine's going to have more parts. So a normal board would have thrown him out and said, get lost, dude. You've never made a phone. What are you talking about? Well, 3 years later, the iPhone business was bigger than Microsoft and Google combined in market value. So I think having kind of the ability to question everything, going to first principles. Elon Musk was walking around Stanford with a book on rockets. Thanks, my friend. Thank you.